All right.
He's doing this over and over and over again.
All right. I'm gonna
Trash. Garbage.
We are concluding our Robert Eggers arc here on Foreplay with his 2024 film Nosferatu. But before we start discussing this vampire flick, we are going to announce our next arc, which will be our first actor arc of all time. And we are doing it because of the recent passing of Gene Hackman. So we are going to be revisiting his many films. Some of them are co-hosts think are the best of his performances. I say this because Richard has already warned me that I'm going to hate one of these that I haven't seen.
Okay. There you go.
He's laughing.
I can guarantee the fans are definitely going to hate one of them. There's one that I've included, which, here's the thing, it's like homework or eating your vegetables. You have to just have it, okay, guys? I know you're not going to enjoy it. You wish you could have the Pop-Tart or whatever, but you can have your proper vegetables. Get it down here.
So those movies are in the order we will be viewing them. First, The French Connection. Second, The Conversation. Third, and probably most palatably, Unforgiven. And four, a film I had not even heard of until Richard mentioned it, Night Moves, a, as he would say, deconstructionist noir from the 70s.
So what's good about that is we covered the whole gamut there, because first movie, French Connection, that's just off... Back up, what's it? You gotta kill him upon him. That's the whole movie right there. Like that for about 2.5 hours. So everyone enjoy. You know what cars are, don't you? Brilliant, you're in. You're already in. Everyone's gonna enjoy that one. Nobody will dislike The French Connection. Then The Conversation is like, imagine someone really, really didactically like recording something and listening back. And then imagine that for 2 hours. That's that. Enjoy. But it's Francis Ford Coppola and Gene Hackman, so I'm going to pretend it's dull. I'm going to actually get really into it. Like, this is great how boring this is. That keeps repeating itself over and over again. I can see some deeper meaning. I'm going to do what Monty would do with a David Lynch film and pretend that, it's so genius what he's doing. It's how, the way he made you bored. He showed that he could create that feeling within you. This genius artwork. And then eventually, Unforgiven, that's just like ultimate bad guys, fucking revenge. It's all the best themes.
One of the best westerns ever.
And then we end on a super unknown one. 70s classic.
I like how the most recent film we're going to be doing is, in fact, Unforgiven, and that movie still from the early 90s.
It's like early 90s.
I think it's 92. Yeah.
We talked about doing some more recent ones, but no. That's it's just all going to be from 90s or actually mostly the 70s.
Listen, it's a tribute to Hackman, and we think we've picked his best.
There's some pretty iconic ones in there too.
Yeah,
absolutely. A couple you have to see.
You know, a lot of people think Unforgiven is a Clint Eastwood movie. As I was saying before we go live, probably Gene Hackman has as much screen time as him, probably a little bit less. But for me, I don't want to say he steals the movie. I think it's a great ensemble piece, but I think Gene Hackman is fucking electric in it. I think
it's super memorable. Yeah, one of the best bad guys of all time.
Yeah, and a believable villain.
Yeah,
you know, because actually, if you look at it from his perspective, is he that much of a villain? He is just trying to keep law in a potentially lawless town. You know. So,
you as lawyer.
I'm just saying. Yeah, exactly. Listen,
my client was just trying to keep law and order in this town. You know.
Listen, I've watched Unforgiven so many times. You know, you start to see things both ways. Is all I'm saying. So, but still, by the way, Clint Eastwood, you know, mega in it too. So yeah, I think that's great, and I think obviously it's a sad loss. He was in his 90s. He was very old, but I mean, obviously the way that we now know he passed away is very, very sad. Obviously, his wife passed, and she was his full-time carer, and then he was sort of confused.
He had
just
dementia
left in a house by himself,
and died.
By the way, the other thing as well,
horrifying end to a great life.
And to be fair, you could argue Clint Eastwood did do this his whole career, but I do just love films. One of my favourite tropes, Monty, is the sort of quiet, you know, drifter who you shouldn't fuck with, and then people are just like, I'm just going to go out my way to fuck with this guy and see, you know, what I'm just going to push him to his limits. And then he's like, I ain't got nothing left to lose. And then they just go nuts, like basically Punisher type archetypes. I love that shit. And when they just keep prodding him, and you know, you just go nuts on them. That's the best.
Yeah, put it this way, I think everyone's going to love French Connection and Unforgiven. I think they're just great movies.
Bangers, yeah.
Just absolute bangers. Essential cinema, and Unforgiven, very, very satisfying holistically. So with the other two, like Duncan said, like with Night Moves, I'm doing the same thing as Duncan. Really, I'm giving you it is a mystery movie where the mystery happens.
Why didn't you just save this
background.
one for our next spit roast arc?
Nah.
No. Dude, it's actually a legit movie.
No, it's a good film.
Yeah, it is. It is a legit movie, and as I said, one of his best performances. It's basically, the real mystery is, will he be able to solve his midlife crisis? And the actual mystery that just happens in the background. Blink and you'll miss it. It's great. I love it. It's
also,
so good.
you have to realise we're also providing a lifestyle as well as films here, Monty. Like now, they're going to be able to watch all these films and go, "Oh, did you never catch the conversation?" Yeah, it's a little bit hard for people to get into at first, but I kind of, I'm in sort of like a club. We study film and whatnot. Just do it like that.
We're just
Cool,
spreading
cool.
pretension.
Yeah. Exactly.
You two can be.
That could have been another name for the series, Spreading Potential.
Yeah, well, not really. When I think the episode from Mulholland Drive opened up with Duncan going,
right.
I think this movie is cheats. So
True.
There's some blue collar.
By the way, there was a comment.
Blue-collar
Sadly, I lost
critique
it. It was like it should have been put in a museum, Monty. There was a guy who came in. I'm only going to say like a month or two ago into an episode of Foreplay, and you can tell. The example of the guy who's just in the wrong saloon completely. Like you don't know where you are right now, bro. He came in and it just said some comment like this, Monty. It goes something like, first they disrespected like Nicolas Cage or something. Then they said 500 Days of Summer is bad. Like this guy just ran through this whole gamut. And I wanted to be like, bro, this channel isn't for you. Like you're gonna hate this. Like and then they had the audacity to say something to Roger Ebert. I'm like,
and I love the 13th Warrior. That's a common one.
No,
too.
I did. That was it. I think it was. I think it might even have been Richard, someone who was triggered that me and you mocked the 13th Warrior. By the way, I'm not even joking.
Went too far on that one.
This will make your skin crawl. If you go check the comment section, there's a very healthy cross section that support Monty and think we're really harsh on the film and it's actually like underrated or whatever. Like I can't even believe you've got your own pocket of people, Monty. It's
my favorite one is we have a YouTube short that continues to get a lot of views of Richard making fun of the main actor, the Viking actor. In the movie, and people love that guy, Richard. They hate you. They say he can act, and he's just stoic. And also, including some comments.
Has he ever been anything else?
No, he's terrible. He's obviously terrible. Okay, he's obviously terrible.
Objectively terrible.
Yeah, you don't just look. Maximus from Gladiator is stoic, but he's played really well. Okay, there's a way to play stoic well, and that isn't it. And also, some people were saying it's the best Viking movie when the Northman exists and was more recent.
Okay, fair enough.
Good.
Reports from the front lines. Here's what people are saying out there on the forums.
Anyway, but that short continues to pop off. We get comments on it like every day of more people supporting. What is it? Ulfric Storm, whatever his name is.
I don't fucking. Oh yeah, Stormcloak, innit?
Yeah, there you go. Anyway,
he's fucking terrible.
Let's talk about a good movie. Nosferatu, which I have to say...
Let's talk about an average movie.
Oh, my God. Here comes... Speaking of spreading pretension, here's Richard and all of the other versions of Nosferatu coming in. Anyway, I saw this in the theaters, and then I watched it again, and I actually enjoyed it more the second time, I found. But this is Thorin's favorite Eggers movie, so I'll let him talk about it
let's
first.
start there. Why is this your favorite out of all
that's
of
what's
the
interesting.
Eggers?
Here's what's interesting. I might have passed Monty like ships in the night because actually I'm going the other way. It was my favourite Eggers movie, but actually on the rewatch, I think it's going to be number 2. I think Northman gets to be number 1 for me now since we just watched Northman again the other week. Because I do think the rewatch of Northman was unreal. Like, I actually think I enjoyed that more than the first time. I think the rewatch of this film was still really good, but the difference is the first time I watched it, I found it incredibly engrossing actually. Like I was one of those people, I wasn't ever checking the time. I was totally in that world. I was going scene from scene to scene. I do think when I rewatched it, I think aesthetically it is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. I think the cinematography is unbelievable in this film. Like for me, this would be like that guy would win the Oscar hands down. Whatever the fuck the guy's name is. Yeah, this guy works with him on all his films. This is a 10 out of 10. It's unbelievable. Like you can almost literally imagine. I don't think this is true, but you could almost imagine that they figured out that technique for how to film in moonlight and just said, right, let's reverse engineer a movie where we do that as much as possible. Because like all those sequences, think of the sequence when he's waiting for the carriage to come and pick him up to take him to the castle. Think of like later ones where like, by the way, the Johnny Depp's daughter, half the movie, she's in like sort of like a Twilight-esque sort of lighting behind her, but the way they've lit it, obviously people are going to draw allusions to this because I think he used similar techniques to Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon and how he did all the candlelight work indoors. The lighting is unbelievable on this film.
Yes,
if you think about it, right, that is essential to like a vampire type story. It's all about the moonlight and how different things look at night from in the day. Notice how one thing you even do in this film, like every classic vampire movie is, you make it so you do a hard cut from some really terrifying nighttime scene to like daytime, and there's all, you know, fucking birds out in the background and all fucking nice, bright, etc. Because it's just a juxtaposition. So I think the first things first with this film is it is just aesthetically a really beautiful film. Like the way it's shot. By the way, it's also got loads of like slow shots, so it's just taking in all the atmosphere. Snow shots. Fucking, I think it storms at sea. It's fantastic. I think like the immersive element is mega. I will say the story wasn't as good the second time around when I watched it as the first time around, because I was just kind of going with the flow on that one. But I do think it's a mega movie though.
See,
it'll still be very highly rated for me.
I do want to talk about the cinematography because I think the aesthetic of it is really key. And for me, why this improved, because I came in and I said this is my least favorite Eggers movie. I think it has jumped over The Witch. I think now I've seen all of his films twice. I think The Witch is now probably my least favorite of his films. But the reason why this jumped up for me, and we'll talk about the narrative, is that I had no expectations of the narrative this time because it is very kind of cut and dry. It's not anywhere near as interesting as the narratives of his other films. You know exactly what you're getting. But because I wasn't focused so much on the narrative, I was just watching it as an aesthetic experience. That's why it really jumped up, was because of that cinematography. And I was listening to some interviews with Blaschke about how he did those scenes in the candlelight and the moonlight, and he had to use a bunch of specialist lenses for the camera, and he actually did shoot them in candlelight when the scene was in candlelight. Nice. So that is the lighting source in those scenes. And the moonlight scenes, he was using lenses that blocked out the red and yellow spectrum, because when things start to get dark, obviously the longer wavelength spectrums start to go first, right? And so, for example, red in the dark will turn to black, and you can still see other colors as, you know, things get darker. So it lets the blue end of the spectrum through, which is why you get these really extraordinary blue shots. But all of this had to be coordinated with the costume department to get costumes that would show up well in these lenses. Right. And just from a technical... He was nominated for an Academy Award for the cinematography for this. And just from a technical perspective...
And rightly so.
And rightly so. I mean, just from a technical perspective of the way he was using the cameras and technology and the way they were planning all of this out, I think was really quite impressive. And the other thing I want to talk about, because the aesthetic is so important of this, is that in Nosferatu, the cinematography is incredibly interesting. We discussed how in The Witch, there were a lot of those long shots that are framed as if they're an oil painting from the 17th century. And in this one, you get to see a lot of kind of early to mid 19th century work, but a lot of the shots are kind of weirdly symmetrical. When he presents characters in this film, they're almost always just straight on to the camera. And when two characters are having a conversation, what he'll do is he'll 180 the camera and just reverse it as if from a POV shot, you are looking directly at the camera. And I noticed with characters that are taller, the camera will be lifted up. So you're kind of seeing down on Lily Rose Depp, for example. So it's very bizarre that you have these conversations where there's no, as far as I can't remember any like over the shoulder shots of a character in conversation. There's only ever one character really in the frame when the conversations are happening, unless it's happening from the side. And the other thing is all the camera movement in this. Now, the Northman had a lot of movement, but the camera movement in this is really bizarre because it will start at one angle and then the camera will pan 90 degrees and that's it. That's like the only movement that we see, or it's zooming in and out on a crane or on a dolly. But if you're looking at any kind of like lateral movement, it'll go from this angle to a hard 90-degree angle. And that is really disconcerting because it feels really unnatural that everything is just so dead on, so angular. And I think it really adds to the disconcerting effect. And you mentioned the carriage sequence, but what they do with the camera in that sequence is so strange because everything is reorienting in 90 or 180 degree angles. So the carriage is like running at Nicholas Hoult, right? The horse rears, and then suddenly the carriage flips 90 degrees because it's at a crossroads, and it flips 90 degrees. Then the camera flips 180 degrees, and you see through the door Nicholas Hoult going in, and then it flips behind him. And basically the next sequence while he's driving to the castle is just going from seeing behind the carriage to Nicholas Hoult. So it's just constantly reversing 180 degrees the whole time, and it's very strange to watch. And I think that's the success, is that you get the disconcerting nature of this, where you start to lose track of where you are in time and space, which is what's happening to Nicholas Holt's character because of the way they do the editing and the camera work. And for me, that's awesome. And they continue to do that throughout the whole castle scene when he's getting chased by the dogs. And
by the way, one thing also they do in this film that's interesting is actually somewhat being faithful to how old-fashioned black and white films were filmed. They do actually very sparingly show you the vampire character early on. They don't show you like too much of it. Like, I actually think the way they even introduce him in the castle is brilliant, where you're not even quite seeing. You can sort of see like a silhouette, and you're getting the voice and sort of a bit of the personality. But it just they drip feed you it throughout the film. They don't show you too much. I think they do a quite good job, like keeping the mystique of the vampire up.
Mm-hmm.
Leave there your conveniences. Set out the deed and sit.
I mean, look, it was a very weird snub that it got at the Oscars, because a lot of people were kind of talking when we went into the Academy Awards about how, like, oh, Nosferatu was nominated for 4, and it was nominated for Best Costume Design, Best Cinematography, Best Production Design, and I can't remember the other one.
I'm surprised it wouldn't be nominated for editing.
Best, did I say maybe. But anyway, the reality is, like, it seemed on the night that it just got snubbed because it was a horror
Makeup
movie.
and hairstyling was the other one, by the way.
Makeup and hairstyling, there you go. Like, realistically, having seen this movie now 3 times, there's no way it shouldn't have won one of those. Like, I mean, you know, the production design was won by that awful Wicked movie.
Fucking hell, okay.
Yeah, so the best costume design too. They got those, you know, Wicked won Oscars, Nosferatu didn't. That's absurd. And for me, the cinematography really is the one where it misses out. I've seen The Brutalist now. The Brutalist was the winner. The Brutalist is a beautiful film and would be a worthy winner in many other years. But for me, you know, it went up against Doom Part 2, Nosferatu. You know, I mean, I might not want to rewatch the second Doom movie at any given moment in time, but you can't dispute the cinematography is impeccable. So I mean, you know, and like I say, if you haven't seen The Brutalist, it's definitely worth a watch, and it is an incredibly good looking movie. But I definitely thought Nosferatu should have had this in the bag, and it didn't. And look, the best film of 2024 got fucking snubbed. The Substance only won best makeup. It didn't. It should have had best fucking movie. Should have had everything. It should have swept the fucking boards. It's like, you know, it was just the best film of the year by some distance, while everyone was raving about Anora. But yeah, for me, I thought it was very weird. I think horror movies are always going to struggle at Academy Awards. It's the one genre that's never really leveled up its game. Like, even animated movies now seem to get more recognition. We're doing foreign language movies winning Best Pictures, but horror just stays in the shadows, you know, quite appropriately. And look, the one thing I would definitely not criticize Nosferatu for is the way it looks. I think it's absolutely stunning. In the same way we waxed lyrical about the Northman, this is as gorgeous, if not more so. I mean, you know, for me, I might prefer the aesthetic of the Northman, but this is a close second, if it's second at all. That'll be up to you. They have some really amazing shots that are reminiscent of... They're reminiscent of other vampire movies, particularly 1992's Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, for instance, the scene with the hand going out across the city,
flying over.
Flying over. It's very reminiscent of that, but it's just done better. It's just done better. It has a much more crisp aesthetic, and like you say, it taps into that sepia-washed era of bygone movies where it's got this very muted palette, and yet it's still very defined and distinct. So the movie looks absolutely gorgeous. I mean, this is just something, this duo that we've talked about on previous episodes where it relates to Eggers, I hope it never breaks up, because when they work together, they create essential cinema that's just also really good to look at.
I'm just scared of what happens if they don't do a movie together. Like, I don't know what a Eggers movie without Blaschke looks like. That's what's scary to me.
I mean, it will, of course, happen at some point in the future. You know, I'm not to say there's any potential friction there, but I mean, just obviously as their stock continues to rise, because now with Nosferatu, this is their first really commercial success. For the budget to what it made, now we know, he can direct a movie and it can make a profit. He's not just a little indie hipster kid anymore. Big studios are going to come a calling. They're going to have their own ideas. Sometimes you have to trade relationships to get the action, get the projects. It gets difficult, and it's the same as well if you're a highly sought after cinematographer. I mean, you know, director's going to be queuing to get you in on their movie. So it's likely there'll come a point where we're going to find out who is the bigger contributor to the inherent beauty of an Eggers movie. But I certainly hope it's a long way away. But I mean, look, just a first topic right out of the gate. I mean, look, yeah, there's no way I could disagree with either of you. The cinematography in this movie is S-tier. It's absolutely gorgeous. It was great to look at. I wish the movie had engaged me more so I could have enjoyed it on a deeper level than beyond the beautiful superficiality of what was on the screen, where every shot was a sumptuous oil painting of sorts. But it didn't. That for me is where the movie falls down, and that's why it's my least favorite Eggers movie. I think
I've got an interesting pivot for you then.
Yeah, okay.
So here's the thing: to make this, we won't just do it the traditional way. One thing I'll ask is this: one of the things I actually enjoy the most about the plot of the film, because the plot essentially, by the way, if you've ever seen the original Nosferatu or any of those like black and white vampire films, it's intentionally even showing scenes that are like the hands creeping up the stairs, all the homages, and also, by the way, they're just great excuses. If you've got an amazing cinematographer, do something amazing with that and make it look sumptuous, and like essentially the way that as a film it looks black and white at times when it isn't black and white, but also has gradients of like color, is I think just incredible. And like I say, it could have just been a clever exercise in itself. Like, hey, I can do these shots. Let's reverse engineer a film as an excuse to do it. But actually, the one part I did find really interesting about the plot is the plot goes exactly as expected for about like 4/5 of the film. And I want to get both your takes on this. But I actually thought it was quite interesting, which is the one element I never would have anticipated coming in. I often tell people what I like about the Coppola 1992, whatever it is, Dracula, is it actually contains an aspect that, because I was only familiar with Dracula, like I read the book when I was about 13 or something, but I can't remember that much of it. But I was only familiar with it because of like cheesy horror films. And in those horror films, they just make Dracula Satan, and then, you know, you're just hoping all the innocent people get away, like a classic horror film. One of the things I always thought the Coppola film did really well was bring out that narrative of like the love story, though, of like actually what like the Vlad Dracul would be like, and the fact that he thinks he's met his like, you know, wife's soul that's been wandering through the ages, and he's reincarnated in the Jonathan Harker's wife. Like, that aspect was really interesting, because if you ever watch that film, they're really faithful to that plot line. They do treat it that on the one hand she is a woman who like wants to stay with the Keanu Reeves character, but on the other hand she is this reincarnated soul who, you know, understands this like incredibly romantic figure of Dracula who's lived throughout the ages. She has like a connection to him, and there's this weird like dynamic they play with. So as a result, the thing I was going to get to is this, Monty. You would think if you watch the first half of this film, the role of the fucking Johnny Depp's daughter is just to be the woman going like, oh, help, like, but actually they have like a really interesting like conclusion to her plot line, where essentially she's like, this is one of the most interesting parts. Think also this, Monty, if you think of the classic setup of, you're going to expect Willem Dafoe's Van Helsing, isn't he? He's there to actually stop the vampire. He's going to know how to kill it. But essentially what they show, and this is almost Lovecraftian in itself, is even he's not that next level to know how you stop this fucking vampire, mate. The only way he's found out is through this old document. There is no other way. You just have to basically, it has to basically like consume the victim. But in doing so, that's like the interesting power dynamic flip, isn't it? Because you would always think of it as the vampire's the one wrecking you because they're the one drinking your blood. But at the end, she sort of like flips the power dynamic and uses it to kill him. And I thought that was actually really interesting end to the story, though. The rest of it, like I say, is the classic. You think you know exactly where it's headed. It's telegraphing where it's going down. By the way, you would assume if you pause the film before they go to that church, they just go and then they have a battle with him, you know, as he's trying to get back to his coffin, and they kill him like some classic vampire stuff. But I thought the actual what they do at the end with the story is quite interesting. I wonder what you think of that, Richard. Was that not unique for you or interesting interesting?
The bookend of the movie, yeah, like that's the most interesting part. And I've got my own theories as to why I didn't like.
But think about what a different dynamic that is to a vampire. At the end, it's almost like she drained him, if you know what I mean. He's all like wrecked and shit. That was very interesting.
You know, completely, and obviously it goes back to the initial thing where he pledges himself to her, like, eternally. And obviously she then essentially honors that pledge by, I'll sacrifice my life and to take you out. And, they both die together. So it is a, I guess, unique twist on kind of the vampire mythos. The problem I really had right out of the gate was motivation. And so first, this might sound silly, but one of the, I don't think 92's Dracula is a particularly good film, right? I think Johnny Depp is horrendous in it, and it's basically held...
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves. Sorry, Johnny. Keanu Reeves with the terrible accent. And Gary Oldman basically holds the movie up. And but what I will say is, with that kind of borderline funny preamble where you learn about Vlad Dracul and how, like, he goes out to battle and his wife thinks he's died, so she tops herself, and then, like, he's just living in a castle all big sad about it, but then he sees her, Winona Ryder, and goes, fucking hell, that's my missus, I gotta get to London, hook up with her, I can have her back. All of that motivation makes total sense. It's actually a really good jumping off point. For the movie to, and that was that little plot line was central to the movie's marketing at the time. The tagline for that movie was "Love Never Dies."
Oh, right.
Right. Okay. So I mean, that is an imperfect film, laughable, risible in some parts. But I know exactly what fucking Dracula is up to, right? Like, I know why he's gone to London. I know what he's about. I know he wants to get back with his missus. Fuck with that, right? Yeah, that's cool. But, like, in this movie, I'm like, he's there immediately and says, I pledge myself to you. Then he seduces her, violates her, and then that's just that. Boom. That's just the scene. And it's like, I don't know. I think I need a little bit more, mate.
I mean, I also just think the beginning of the film, in terms of the plot and the motivation, is pretty weak because it takes place years earlier, but it's kind of indeterminate, and we don't know why. It's all very vague because even when Willem Dafoe's character, who's the alchemist, comes in and says, he's the occultist, and he says, well, some people, he's just attracted to her because some people just basically have supernatural power. And so they were in a previous commitment because of the supernatural power at some point before she got married. And now here he is coming back again, and that's basically it. I do agree that the central premise is pretty weak.
I love vague setups to movies, right? But, like,
it has to be compelling.
But at no point is there just even a background explain. It's fine. It could be subtextual. It can be in the background. It could be something you've got to intuit and pick up on. But it just isn't explained at all in the film. And the profundity of her connection to him, it just isn't really elaborated on. So I had a hard time with that. I also had a hard time with the lead actor, Nicholas Hoult, or whatever he's called.
He's a bit of a stiff board. He's also like Keanu Reeves in that sense, isn't he? He's not doing much, is he?
Bro, like, I don't know how a guy like him could live in the 1800s.
Oh, it's mad, isn't it?
He's just like, he's just such a pussy. Like, in every scene, he's like,
all right,
he's doing this over and over and over again.
All right. I'm gonna
garbage.
So I'm gonna defend the characterization, which is that
you're gonna defend the pussies.
I know.
Of course you are.
Look, because shut up. So basically, because it's a romantic movie, and there are many in romantic novels, romantic poetry. There are many characters that are like him.
Oh, he could be a Jane Austen character.
Exactly.
Sure.
Well, that would be a little bit earlier than this, but yes, effectively.
Jane Austen as well.
Exactly.
Don't want Jane Austen in my vampire movies, frankly.
Look, you may not like it, but this is romantic literature. Hate to say it.
But this is what male peak performance looks like. Yeah.
This is what early 19th century male peak performance looked like. I mean, it's just he's a character from a romantic novel, not as in what you guys are thinking when I'm talking about the literary period of
Yeah.
Romanticism. And a lot of the Romantic poets were guys like this. If we're like, come on, we really going to pretend
Yeah,
that
they're foppish. I understand.
that Shelley
those.
wasn't a giant. Look, the most badass Romantic poet was Byron, and was he really that badass? Anyway,
Look,
I'm not going to get into Romantic poets.
The problem I've got with Thomas Hutter, right, is
Hoult.
that his Hutter. I'm
yeah,
now
the
going to use
character.
the character.
Yeah, sorry.
because I don't want to impugn the actor. I'm sure he was only doing what he was instructed to do, and he's a very manly man in real life. But like, at what point do you like level up, right? Because it's like he's still doing the like at the end, like when you're committed to killing the vampire and saving your missus, like. I just found him insufferable in every single scene he was in. And, like, that was another big problem for me. There was no one I could really connect to in the movie for the storyline. Like, usually in a vampire movie, right, in any horror movie, there's a protagonist you latch onto and you follow their journey right the way through. You know, a Scream Queen, a Scream King, your final girl, you know, somebody that makes it to the end and clearly is going to make it to the end because they present themselves as being above everybody and a little bit smarter, a little bit sharper. In this movie, they're trying to do that around Lily Rose Depp, his wife. She's in bed for the whole fucking film. She's just in bed. She's just in bed having seizures. This is mental. Like, I mean, I was really taken aback because everybody said how great her performance was. Like, come on, you're fucking asleep half the time. What are we talking about?
I do think her performance is
mental.
you're getting distracted. I want to talk about Nicholas Hoult because so I really like Nicholas Hoult as an actor. Like it. Like, I think his first really memorable role was in Mad Max Fury Road, where he was the war boy. Who was
I liked him as a war boy.
He was great. I really liked him in The Favorite. I really like him in the TV show The Great, which is the pseudo historical Catherine the Great show. He's excellent in that.
He's also Beast.
Yeah, that's true. I think he's good in that role too. But I think the problem with using Nicholas Hoult in this role is that he is a character actor. And him being in a straight leading role feels really weird. And especially if you watch him, he plays idiosyncratic characters who are often man-children. And the fact that he was literally just in Renfield, another vampire movie, which is a comedic vampire movie, is weird. Like, it's weird that he was in back-to-back vampire movies that are very different tonally. And I do wonder if this movie would have been a lot better if Robert Pattinson was in this role. But for me, it's hard to get over the Nicholas Hoult baggage that I have because I like him in his deadpan comedic roles or his more like tweaker roles. And so to see him be a like straight up leading man character, it really threw me out because all I can see when I look at him is these other roles. It's hard for me to take him seriously.
He didn't have the gravitas for me either,
No.
just in general, like as a leading man. Like, you know, what you're supposed to do, and any character that's based on Harker, you're meant to, you know, you're meant to be riled up. You're meant to totally empathize with what he's going through. Like, I'm not going to let some undead fuck steal my girl. Like, I'm going to go and, well, we're going to get this dealt with. I'm going to stake him.
He's just
right?
a cuck, man. He's just a cuck.
Yeah, but he is in this movie. Yeah, Nicholas Hoult plays a cook, unbelievable in this movie. And you see, so okay, that's fine. I'm like Duncan. I'm like, okay, maybe this is going to be subversive, and maybe actually he's going to be fucking useless, and his wife is going to. I mean, and she does, by the way. She ends up being the one that kills the vampire. But you know, like I say. Can she be out of bed for a scene? Can we have a walk? I mean, she does. She has got a couple right at the start, but I mean, I'm not joking when I say probably 70% of her screen time is her with her eyes rolled up in her head.
I shall persist to join you every night, first in sleep, then in your arms. Everything will be laced with abomination, and you'll be knee-deep in blood.
He's good at doing that, to be fair.
Why Willem Dafoe's next to her going, you see, the occult, the devil has taken us, so it has. Like, he's just fucking overacting, loving that. He was the best thing in the movie for me, but we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I thought both of the leads were terrible. I thought terrible casting. I thought terrible casting, which is rare for an Eggers movie. I thought terrible casting, and I thought terrible performances, really over the top, silly performances. And so when I watch Nosferatu and I think about this should be a serious vampire movie. There's a time and a place for like hamminess, and I don't think it was in this because everyone else is playing it deadpan. You know,
Yeah.
if
And
you
Bill
contrast-
Skarsgård is
Yeah,
playing it in a
exactly.
way that's more
Exactly what I was gonna
realistic.
say.
And I think
Yes,
Bill Skarsgård
completely.
does a really good job in this film. And
He's brilliant.
And to Thorin's point, the way they shoot him, especially in the beginning, and the way he does the voice and the accent is fantastic. And so for me, it does cross the line a bit. But again, like I'm tainted with this burden of having read too much literature from this era, and also knowing where it's going, which is straight into. I mean, the next period is Victorian literature, right? And that's where all of those like classic Gothic novels like The Monk came from. And those books are terrible. They're terrible, just like super gory soap operas. I hate those books. But it starts to bridge into that aesthetic by the end. And it's just what it was. Like if you guys, I don't know if you've seen that movie Crimson Peak.
What's that?
It's Guillermo del Toro. It's a Johnny Depp movie.
I do not think I've seen this.
It was released in 2015. Oh, it's Tom Hiddleston. Sorry, not Johnny Depp. I'm being silly. We're just all thinking about Johnny Depp being in the wrong movies. But it is it's a Gothic movie that I don't really like because again, it basically takes its cues from that period of literature, but it is a very good representation of that literature if you are into that. But it is a crazy, over the top, super bloody ghost horror movie from the Victorian period. But Nosferatu, I think, starts to creep into that territory if you're familiar with that film, because that's the next literary period that came along. So I feel like I feel it is reflective of the literature of that era. I think people just probably don't necessarily vibe with the romanticism of it.
Duncan, did you struggle with the leads?
The problem is, I do think the Nicholas Hoult guy is pretty crap, but like I say, it reminds me of the Keanu Reeves casting in Dracula, which is like if it depends how much you give a fuck about Jonathan Harker's character. If I agree with you, if you want to care, it's very hard to. Like, if anything, when I watch this film, that's almost my excuse to be like, I'm just going to enjoy the vampire part as well, to be fair, because actually, this guy's more compelling than this fucking Nicholas Hoult guy. Let's see how this plays out. So, but here's the thing, I don't really agree on the Johnny Depp daughter one, though. I actually thought she was all right. Like, I didn't listen, she wasn't like, I wouldn't have put her like win the Oscar or something, but I thought I actually thought the actual scenes where she was doing possession stuff was quite good actually.
Yep.
That's quite hard to pull off. I normally find that a bit cheesy when people do the like I'm possessed type shit. So
Yield before this ancient talisman. Professor! I will not harm her. I command you, hearken to my voice.
I thought that wasn't too bad. And also, the problem with this film for me is, I'm not really, when I watch this film, I'm not really thinking of the performances that much. It's more like I'm just enjoying the aesthetic so much. And I do find, for example, I find a lot of those scenes very intense. Like, I do feel like it was overwrought, but in a good way, if you know what I mean. Like, all the possession and vampire scenes for me are like super on edge. Like, it's really fucking intense shit on the screen.
For me, I think like the parts I enjoyed were definitely all the castle sequences. Like when he's in the castle and he's there with Dracula. I mean, because that's like, my theory as to why I don't like this movie is I think it's because I have seen this a million times. Like I can't even tell you.
I would be.
By the way, the parts in Romania are mad stylish. Like even when he's in the church afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Fucking
I also want to clarify. When you say you don't like this movie, we all still agree this is a good movie, right? It's just going up.
It's a 6 out of 10 for me. Maybe 6.5.
It's probably like a 7 for me, but I do think that this is still a good film worth seeing.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying, like, I've now watched it 3 times, and
I just think people are going to come in and be like, "You guys are crazy. You don't like this movie," but like, we don't think it's a bad movie.
I also think there's an angle I want to ask you about, which is, I don't know how much of this is intentional, but one thing I did think to myself when I was watching this film is, right, the one thing they do with her character that's quite interesting is they almost make her character have 2 sides to it. So she has the side that's just the plain, like you say, Monty, like sort of a Victorian type person who's just like, oh, it's good to be innocent and to be pious and stuff. And then she has this other side that's sort of like, sadly now they present it as some feminist bullshit, but like, you know, some fucking like her passion unleashed, and she's like, to me, do you think they were trying to play with some sort of dynamic there? Like, because in real life that's the person you're supposed to marry, you know, the boring guy who's just trying to get a job and move up there. But then on the other hand, you got this like, I mean, it's terrifying in this sense, but this like alternate dimension of passion and compulsion and desire, and so do you think they were trying to play with something there?
I think for me, where this film falls apart, I think they are, but there are two themes that I wish we would have seen more, and that what you're saying, I think, goes into the theme where what's interesting is that she was already in a relationship with Orlok, the vampire, prior to her marrying Thomas, and the fact that they are pretty much forever entangled in this extremely toxic but also unavoidably attractive and sexual union is really interesting. And I think that there could have been more done to talk about the nature of male-female relationships and compulsive sexuality, and that we just didn't get anything.
I mean, think how
deep.
different it is, Monty, that normally it's presented as Dracula can just use hallucinations on people and trick them into doing whatever he wants. In this one, it's like they're stressing some mad consent angle.
Yes.
You have to consent to being
and not only that, but
raped or
he
something like
punishes
that.
her by killing her friends and her friends' children when she doesn't do what he wants to do. So I think there isn't enough exploration of that theme.
No, I'm with you.
And then the other theme,
Because I could sense it lurking, but they didn't go hard.
yeah, they didn't go
just
hard
sort of left
enough.
it out
And
there.
then which also, like, I think could have been better for the Nicholas Hoult character in terms of the cuck angle, because you get the contrast of the, oh, we're just a young couple setting up our lives and we're in love and are we going to have a family and all this other stuff. So, you know, you have that more wholesome angle, right? But contrasted with the Orlok angle. But they don't really do enough with that, in my opinion, so I wish they would have gone harder on that theme. And the other theme that they just don't go hard enough on is the theme of, because remember, we're coming out of the Enlightenment era, and everything was about science, and look at what we can do with our exploration of the natural world and rationalizing phenomenon. And basically, you know, we understand that Willem Dafoe's character was a respected scholar who then started reading Paracelsus and Agrippa and these alchemists, and he got into occultism. And he's been thrown
Which
out.
I love.
exile.
I love all of this stuff.
Sure,
Him and the Innocent dynamic, the Ralph
Yes,
Innocent
great.
character, the Doctor. I love all
Great.
that stuff.
It's the best part of the movie.
Great. Yeah.
In terms of the actors and the characters. But
And by the way, that's even the part that everyone will forget. That guy's called Simon McBurney, the guy who plays like the Knock or whatever his name is, his boss.
Yeah.
That guy kills it in that scene, man. Like, where he becomes like essentially the Renfeld character. He does a fucking killer job.
So but when we talk about the science versus unexplained phenomena, like supernatural phenomena, we even have the great line in this movie about, what is it? The gaseous, not everything can be explained by the gaseous light of science. It's one of Willem Dafoe's line. What a great line.
We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science.
But we just don't get enough of that. There's no actual conflict between the science and the occult, because all of that happened prior to the film, when we get this backstory that's given by Innocent's character about Defoe's character, right? And so it just doesn't feel like there is a little bit of that between Defoe and the friend Friedrich, where they're questioning his diagnosis of the demonic possession, but they don't delve deep enough into that. And so for me, those two themes, like, what is the nature of this very strange romantic relationship, and what does that mean about the attraction between men and women? Because obviously Orlok's not very attractive, but there's something underneath that. And what is that theme, and how does this attraction sometimes destroy not only one person but both people in this particular case? They both die as a result of this relationship. And then also, why do we get no setup between this like cool potential Enlightenment science versus occult angle? Obviously, this is near and dear to my heart because I love occult movies and I love the kind of Enlightenment period. And there was a chance here to have a really great banger movie about occultism in the romantic post-Enlightenment period, and we just didn't get it. So that's what's disappointing to me. That's where I watch it and I'm like, this is beautiful, but there's not enough meat underneath for me to think this is truly a great movie. There's no commentary on history or the human condition, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's why I say the problem is, after rewatching it, it's more like a beautiful roller coaster ride where I know all the twists and turns that are coming. I'm just sitting back enjoying the experience. It's not. There's not actually as much that they sort of like the ideas. They just throw them out there, but they don't really connect with them that much. By the way, one thing I do think is actually underrated about this film, though, is the actual decision to have him speak in that really stilted way, which, by the way, is not particularly Romanian. If you ever Romanian people speak, that could have gone really badly when he chose a bold. I thought that worked really well. Actually, that was quite an interesting sort of just nondescript, weird sounding accent. I thought it was quite believable. It added to the character for me.
It is a black omen to journey in poor health. You will remain and well rest yourself.
I actually quite like the fact that the vampire aspect's a little bit subdued, but you're still seeing some awesome scenes with it. So I thought they did a very good job with that part. Personally.
Yeah, Bill Skarsgård performance is kind of interesting, and for me, he's an actor that I'm kind of keeping an eye on a little bit because he's another one of those ones. I always love actors that pick the interesting projects, right? That are in the interesting movies I consider to be kind of a little bit off the wall and not necessarily mainstream. And obviously, he did, I think, a really good job of playing a monster in It. It's hard. The only good thing about the It TV movie is obviously Tim Curry as Pennywise. And it's pretty big shoes to fill, big clown shoes to fill. And, I think he did a good job. I don't think the It movies are good. Just jump scare slop, if we're being honest about it. But he adds an extra dimension to the villain across both of those movies. And I was like, you know what? This is probably good casting for Nosferatu. I was wanting to see how he would approach it. And I think he's great. I think the accent, the physicality, the stilted nature of it, he does sound like something ancient and out of time. And I think he understands, for me, he understands exactly that is the kind of, that's what would happen. He's speaking in an ancient tongue. It's barely English. He's probably had to learn with not too much contact around him. He's maybe done it via some sort of cultural osmosis. He's just isolated in a castle, and the way he moves as well. He's a pretty good physical actor. And I like him. He's been in a couple of interesting films. He was in Barbarian. If you've seen that, he plays the normie dude right at the start before the film really goes crazy, who just happens to be in the house. And to even want to be in a movie like that is kind of cool. He obviously was in one of the Deadpool movies as well.
He was in John Wick 4. He was really good in John Wick 4.
Yeah, see, John Wick, I don't do John Wick. I did the first, and I've even got a review of that up on my channel. I just couldn't handle John Wick. Just such a silly film. Too silly.
It's supposed to be. What do you want from it?
Yeah, I know, but it's just I can't handle it. But anyway, I really do like him, and I think for me, as I said, the standouts in this film with Dafoe and him. As a villain, as a vampire, it's really, really good. I don't know if it gets to the same height as Klaus Kinski, and this was another problem I had with the movie. In preparation for this, I watched the 1979 Werner Herzog version. Obviously, I watched the original. I watched Shadow of the Vampire, where Willem Dafoe plays the vampire. He plays Max Schreck. The premise of that film is John Malkovich is the director of the original Nosferatu, and he hires a real vampire to play the vampire, and that's Willem Dafoe. So you can fucking
It's always a John Malkovich movie like this. It's always a John Malkovich movie. It's from the early 2000s. So it is Willem Dafoe and Malkovich overacting to fuck. It is great. Really good. So I watched all of that and then sat down to watch Nosferatu. And I have to be honest, by the time I got to the village, and we're dealing with the villagers going, you don't go into the castle. And I'm like, bro, I've seen this a million times. I've watched conservatively, I've probably seen 500, 600 vampire movies where the setup is you go to the village, the villagers say, what castle, which count, then someone comes up with a clove of garlic and a cross and says, don't ever say his name. And you're like, well, I thought he didn't exist, big homie. And then you go up to the castle and then he's real. It's not even just like the vampire movies. The Keep also, that movie which also takes place in Romania.
Yeah. But this is what I mean. It's like, that shouldn't make me detract from the movie. I know that. I know it's really unfair. But unfortunately, as I was watching it, it became apparent that outside of what Duncan's already highlighted with the way the vampire is vanquished, the movie doesn't really have anything original to say.
But let me ask a different question.
That's what upset me about it.
I know we're old and grumpy, but what if what if you were Gen Z and you had never seen anything like this before? But now you understand the tropes.
Let me tell you why I think a Gen Zer might bounce off this film. I think, and this is again something I really respect about what Eggers did, they didn't try to beautify Orlok in any way like they did in the 92 Coppola version, where he can be an old white pale guy with the fucking old lady's perm and long fingers 1 minute, but he can also be an incredible fly looking motherfucker the next, right? Like, they didn't feel compelled to do that here. It's like he just is. And the full frontal nudity scene of him lying in the coffin is fucking grotesque. And let's also be real, there's 2 scenes of people having sex with corpses in this movie. 2, right?
So, but don't you think the Zoomers identify with the Nicholas Hoult character?
I mean, maybe, but what I'm going to tell you about Zoomers, and this is no disrespect to them, they're going to bounce off creepy, scabby, scaly, grotesque corpse sex. They're not gonna, so this is what I mean. The more repulsive elements of the film, the plague motif that runs through the movie, I don't think that's for us. That's for us fucking boomer heads that have seen so much that please shock me, Eggers. Please make me feel something in my dopamine receptors. Please shock me, But like the Zoomers, I think, are going to be really repulsed by that. I mean, in the Red Letter Media review about this, they were like reading the reviews, and people were just like, I mean, some of them were stupid, like Dracula looked like Boat or something, like was one of them. I don't know what that was, but they were lots of people were talking about the corpse sex and how like really repugnant it was. And while again, I admire the almost full, I don't want to say vulgarity of that, but the gratuitousness of that, because that's the reality of what's happening. That's what's happening when you're being seduced by this living corpse. I think for a younger audience, that's going to feel extreme. I think that's going to feel gratuitous. They're not going to understand that this is the kind of almost like the decaying decadence that permeates this movie, and we're not going to shy away from expressing that in the physical realm, which makes total sense,
Well, also the entire film is about subversive sexual relationships. So
yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, exactly. Sexual relationships that to the eye appear repugnant. So yeah, I totally get it and totally understand why he did it, but I think Zoomers are going to struggle with this film as well.
Yeah, to your point about the tropes too, I guess why this feels weird is that we didn't get those tropes in any of the other Eggers movies. We didn't enter it thinking, well, here we go, here's the greatest hits of whatever films. I mean, even films like the Northman, which I think are clearly highly influenced by sword and sorcery films like Conan the Barbarian, of which it literally steals scenes from. I never got the sense that it was stereotypical in any way. There was always something surprising happening at the beginning of these films. And the Lighthouse is unlike anything ever. So I guess it does feel like he does tap into that a little bit too much. And, it's important to note that this film was literally being written at the same time The Witch was being written. That's how long this thing was in development. It was over 10 years in the making. And I do wonder if we are getting the results. And I know Eggers always wanted to make this, but it feels as though this is a less mature idea and in less mature execution in terms of writing than his other films. And I wonder if he is presenting an early work later in his career, and that is affecting this film because...
You think this is like when someone has an old track in the archives that didn't get on an album, and they bring it out years later?
Or it's like you're a published author with a bunch of hits, and you're like, but what if my graduate work, my graduate
I've got a short
work,
story collection that'll blow you away.
You did learn a lot from writing all those other books, but I do know that both he and Blaschke have been talking about this movie and working on it for 10 years. And even if you go back in his interviews before he was doing other movies, people would always be like, oh, I heard you want to remake Nosferatu. And it's like, this has just been in the pipeline for a long time. And I wonder if when it came time to do it, he didn't look at this with as critical of an eye when it came to the writing.
Yeah,
you see the evolution of his cinematography, right? You see that because now it's being finally storyboarded and put onto camera, and they have all of this, technique they've developed in these different lighting situations, right? And they've all this mastery of framing and this synergy that he has developed with Blaschke, but it just doesn't feel that the writing is as advanced as something like the Northman was.
I'm going to give you an extreme comparison here, right? And I'm not in any way saying it's as bad, right? But I do recall when Gus Van Sant did a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho with Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates, and people lost their mind about that. They were like, why does this movie even need to exist? And Gus Van Sant was like, it's a tribute. I love Hitchcock, I love Psycho. This is me making Psycho. Problem being, of course, outside of one, he added a masturbation scene where Vince Vaughn's cracking one off, like looking through a keyhole or whatever. That was his contribution to Psycho. Other than that, it was an identical film, and it got absolutely critically panned. But increasingly, as we've moved forward in time, and remakes and reboots and reimaginings and all this bullshit terminology that we use, as they've become more ubiquitous in the cinematic landscape, the question I always ask is, like, why is this movie? Like, why is it here? Why, what are you doing differently? What justifies the remake? And unfortunately, this looks like a young Robert Eggers that was really ambitious right out the gate, working on projects, and the young Eggers said to himself, this would be my ultimate vanity project if I could do anything. If I could do anything in my career, it would be to remake Nosferatu. No doubt one of his favourite movies, clearly a touchstone, across all of his films with the use of light and shadow. But that's being in love and enamored by a movie isn't a justification to remake it. And ultimately, for me, I don't think the movie adds anything to the... I mean, like, would you say it's better or more important than the original? Obviously not. I don't even think it's better than the 79 Herzog version, if I'm just being blunt with you. I think it's a good movie. I think it shows a lot of talent. I think it's got lots of interesting things that I like. But ultimately, if this movie didn't exist, and if he'd made some super sick original werewolf movie, or that fucking heraldic chivalry movie he was talking about, I'd have much preferred to have seen those, rather than a remake of a film that ultimately, in and of itself, is the blueprint for every vampire movie that's ever existed. And that's the problem. It's like there's not enough originality here. There's not enough that makes it special and makes it stand out. But I understand I'm a unique test case because, as I said, I could have closed my eyes and seen where this is going, bar one or two details. Because this is how this trope works. This is how this story works. It will always work this way, going right the way back to Bram Stoker's original text. So that was fundamentally my disappointment with the movie. I don't know why. It's not fair. It's not fair to expect a Nosferatu remake to shock me and surprise me. And
I mean, you're also biased because you are a huge horror fanatic, so you've kind of seen it all. You know what I mean? That's why I say I'm curious what people with fresher eyes.
I really wanted to adore this movie. I was so psyched when it was announced. Like, you can't even imagine it. One of my favorite directors remaking a seminal horror movie. I was very, very excited for it. And unfortunately, I mean, again, maybe that excitement is part of the problem. But I'm not like Duncan in the sense that I understand this is a beautiful roller coaster ride. I struggle with beautiful roller coaster rides in a way. I kind of need the best movies for me are always the ones that like they get into my brain and I want to rewatch them immediately and I want to test theories against them. I want to go online and read what people are saying about it. I understand though some people are very good at being experiential. Like, they just sit and watch the movie and they let the movie, all disbelief suspended, no critique happening in the moment, and enjoy. I wish I had that. I'm definitely envious because I understand how this movie succeeds on that. I mean, because like I say, it's beautiful, big performances in it. It's obviously like, sound. Again, classic Eggers, assault on the senses, some of the fucking score.
Oh, this is definitely a film, by the way, to turn the fuck up too. You put
yeah.
the volume right loud on this one. Also, the actual music as well as like the score is really fucking over the top too for some of the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, my internal monologue the entire time was going, and now he's going to meet Dracula, and now he's going to wake up with the bite marks on his chest, and then he's going to see a rat, and then he's going to go to the and it's just like, unfortunately, I couldn't turn that off when I was watching this film, unfortunately.
So that's I enjoyed some of the classic hits though. Like I enjoyed that character who's like the Renfeld type character. Who's like the master's coming. I thought that guy, look, he was chewing up the scene.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Killing it.
Yeah, he was
fucking killing it. And by the way,
You have forsaken me, and he shall reign over all of your empty corpses.
Similarly, in the old 1992 one, Tom Waits fucking unbelievable in that part. If anyone's ever seen it, that's another like mad sleeper cameo performance. I thought that guy killed it. By the way, a lot of the like side characters were pretty good in this. I'm with you though. I will say, like, if I actually want the film to be amazing, I would just recast the main actor as someone like that I give a fuck about. Basically, like I don't. By the way, I just don't care about that actor. So why to me it is like he has just recast Keanu Reeves. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Like these are empty ciphers you put a good character into. So if you're just giving me nothing, like it's just a guy essentially getting cocked from fucking the first minute till the end. Like, brilliant, okay. That's not really that unique a character, is it? So I will say that part makes it harder to give a fuck about the central storyline, unless you're just interested in the dynamic of the vampire. That I do think the Willem Dafoe guy, like I say though, is quite clever, because I feel like that one is almost the red herring. That is set up, Monty, to make you think that's like a Van Helsing character that's somehow going to like figure out the secret.
The
Like,
and all that,
the joke is there isn't one. Like even he hasn't fucking met Dracula, mate. Like he's basically just read it in a book. Like.
I do like the end, as we've mentioned, but it feels like the twist comes too late to save most of the film from being interesting, and the twist also just doesn't have the thematic resonance that twists in the, like, if we think about the twist in the Northman with like the revelation of, like, compared to that twist with the revelation of his mother's real motives, that hits you really hard, and it's like brutal. It's brutal, right? Don't really feel like I actually just don't even care that she dies, because I don't like Thomas, and so I don't care about the tragedy of their relationship.
That's the other part. Like the right. Again, I'll go back. I don't know why I'm referencing 92 Dracula so much in this. That wasn't the plan, because I hope nobody goes out and like watches that thinking this is some sort of subliminal recommendation. It's not. But again,
also a good film. Check it out.
That's we got a spit roast movie, boys.
I'll definitely watch that one. I love that film.
But anyway, I mean, listen. By the way, it has been a while since I said it. That could go the opposite way of Batman Returns. Who knows?
I think it'll draw on you.
Yeah, memory's a motherfucker. But
and Gary Oldman is sick in that film.
Yeah. Definitely agree with that. But anyway, I'll go back to referencing that. I understood the power and the profundity of Gary Oldman's longing. I got it. I too would have done anything, to
peak Winona Ryder.
Yeah, for peak Winona Ryder, exactly. Especially if I was Gary Oldman, you know what I mean? Like, absolutely, you definitely punch you well above your weight there, son. So I totally get it. I totally get why, from a character motivation standpoint. And the strength of their feeling. And by the way, the scenes where they're together and they're interacting, the whole art of seduction has way more power and impact than this. Like, he's he's a smelly old corpse, and like, yeah, you are pledged to be, and off he goes, and then you don't see him for like 8 years or whatever the fuck it is, and then she's in a coma, and like fucking, like just like rubbing herself through a 90 about fucking Orlok, right? Meanwhile, he doesn't even know he's not, like, so I can't even understand that. And then, as I said, the lead, well, surely they're gonna have some chemistry. Nah, he's just crying the whole time about, and he's an accountant, so like, I needed one of the relationships related to her to fucking bang. I needed one of them to be powerful and emotionally resonant so I could understand it. But unfortunately, he's too monstrous and abstract for me to really understand how they interact. Beyond him, like, just just being some insane monstrous lech at the end.
It would have been nice for them to have some sort of scene when he was less decomposed, or they actually had some kind of relationship where
he's dropping a bits at the end as well, mate.
Look, maybe you can fix this in certain ways. Maybe she was actually she was like Romany from Romania, and she had moved to Germany for whatever reason and married this guy, and she had this history of him previously where we got to see some of it, but it just feels very bizarre.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I cannot understand what the relationships are like, and like you say, I can't even really understand their marriage. I think it's kind of intimated in the movie when she's talking to people that actually it is kind of a bit of a loveless marriage, and she's like, oh, I wish he wasn't going, but I guess I could just get to fucking strum one out to vampire ghost man in my dreams.
I actually feel like, for real, that would be the sort of modern aspect they should have put on the film, is that they should have played with that dynamic more, the idea of, like, even though it's horrible and repulsive, there's something about that character that's obviously compelling to her in a way that her real life
that's what I'm saying. You have that dynamic between a potential marriage of duty or what society expects of you in the marriage, and then there's this really, like, sexy thing that you want, and you're cheating on your husband or whatever in order to get it. But the things that I wish were there just are not there. They're just not there.
Think about the power of the relationship in the Northman that we saw, the last scene when he jumps out the boat and he's like, I'm going to go back and fight at the volcano. They're only together for a little bit. There's way more chemistry there, right? Obviously, can't really talk about the witch having any chemistry. That's just a fucking miserable nightmare for everyone. And the Lighthouse is very homoerotic, so it's not an apples for apples comparison. But if you go back to the David Lynch,
what are you talking about? The mermaid love sequence.
True. Yeah. The mamussy, just a great scene. But like, if you go back to the David Lynch arc, David Lynch, he understood how to cast people that had real fucking chemistry whenever they were on screen. Like fucking Laura Dern and Nick Cage and Wild at Heart. Like you could totally believe they were at it in real life. You know what I mean? Like they had that chemistry. They had that feel to it. There's nothing like that in this movie. And I think in a movie that's essentially about longing and love, that's obviously, it's very easy to get bamboozled and baffled by the vampiric text and, the monster and the horror of it all. But this is about love and longing. I don't think it executes particularly well on that concept, because neither of the two relationships, it's a love triangle essentially between an eternal monster and a fucking accountant that has to level up his game to fight off the eternal monster, and one woman who's like, but the monster, but the money, and we figure this the fuck out. That's how it's always been since time, immemorial. That's how it's been, and this movie doesn't do that, and it's not like subverting expectations, Ryan Johnson style. It's not subverting expectations at all. It's still playing it straight. It just doesn't explain the relationships by giving you scenes that make you understand why she would like the rotting, crumbling vampire, why Harker's character would do absolutely anything for her. She's just catching the vapors for 70% of the movie. And I just think that's crazy for me. Like, I just literally was not invested in any of that, but I was invested in what Willem Dafoe was up to. Like, I was very invested in his character arc. I was like, look, surely he's going to save the day. That's what I wanted, Duncan. I wanted Willem Dafoe to be Van Helsing and save the day and be like, I found it, I found the scroll, I can vanquish the evil, back ye! And Ralph Ineson's like watching and going, oh, maybe there's something to this occultism after all. Perhaps there are greater things. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah. Like, I wanted him to be validated that there was this unknowable, thing outside of our sphere of scientific knowledge. I wanted that because I also think Eggers films, they all lean into the supernatural just being real. And obviously, a vampire is... Innocent's not convinced. He's not even convinced by the end with everything he's seen. He's just like, well, whatever. I'm off to clinic, lad. See you tomorrow. So I didn't get anything out of the movie I really wanted, unfortunately, from a Nosferatu remake. Beyond, as I said, it's a treat for the eyes. It's a treat for the ears. But it just lacked substance. And maybe that's... As I say, maybe I'm coming from a very elitist, snobbish position.
People are going to be big mad because people like this movie, and it made a ton of money. It was very financial. Look, I think this is still a pretty good movie, and I am willing to have this make a bunch of money if Robert Eggers gets a bunch more money to do weird stuff. So
yes,
I'm fine.
I'm hoping this is like Ben Wheatley doing The Meg 2. Right? And like, now we're going to get some super sick, right? Okay, I've done commercial Nosferatu. Even I, the great Eggers, acknowledge it was a bit of a vanity project. Now,
I mean, look,
Werewolf.
Everything we know about Werewolf, his new movie, where he's insisting on making it in 13th century England, which is a period where they spoke Middle English. So if you've read the Canterbury Tales, that movie's going to need subtitles. Remember how he couldn't do the Northman entirely in Old Norse? Well, this will be partially understandable to the average English speaker, but if you read the Canterbury Tales, you'll see real quickly why this movie will definitely have subtitles. So I hope
Mel
it's weird,
Gibson
man.
can make a movie in ancient Aramaic, we're fine.
He made
We're
Apocalypto
fine.
in Mayan, too.
Yeah, exactly. We're fine. Like, we're going to be fine with, ancient English or whatever the fuck it's called.
Middle English.
Middle English, that's it.
Old English would be Beowulf. This is post-Norman invasion, so it's similar to more similar to modern English.
But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of tough. I mean, do you think this is a movie you'll rewatch, Duncan? Like,
I will definitely, just for the aesthetic angle. I will say, like I say, I was kind of surprised because I actually thought if I really enjoyed it the first time, surely I'll just get all the exact same enjoyment of the aspects. But I will say, I agree with you, sort of like when I'm just watching, and I'm obviously enjoying the scenes, but I'm thinking more of like, what's this plot referring to, or what are they playing with here? A lot of it does seem like things were sketched out or alluded to, but they didn't really like connect it much. Like, that's the part I'm actually a bit surprised by. I feel like if you just went a bit more on the script, I think you could have done a lot more with the film. You could have had all the same scenes, but you could have just done more with it.
yeah.
Because, like I say, I feel like they were trying almost to very lightly allude to that with the whole plot at the end. Because, like I say, the end is actually a really interesting flip on the dynamic. At the end, essentially, the victim actually is the one who sort of wrecked the vampire. And now the vampire's all drained out and dead. And he couldn't, by the way, he couldn't resist leaving in time for fucking, the joke there is like, that's one part that also didn't work as well, which is, that is just like, I was just thinking, Richard, that famous trope in the UK of where you go and you're supposed to go straight home, Monty, but you go, I'll just nip in for a pint with the lads. And then it's like 6 hours later, you missed the last train home, all pissed drunk after like. It did feel like that. It's like, should I nip off? Oh, I better get home. But you know what? Just get half an hour more. I know you just wrecked. So I could have done more with that. But like, I felt like they were hinting at something really interesting that they didn't explore. But I do think it is one of the like just visually, it's one of the best films I've ever seen. It's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, we're kind of back to that. I mean, look, I'll also say this. Another important aspect of the movie just is what it gives permission to moving forward, because we all know the Hollywood system is very driven by trends. And so what Robert Eggers has done by creating a commercially successful, decadent vampire remake in 2025, and again, combined with the punk satire of The Substance being incredibly successful and critically acclaimed. What's happened there is, I mean, we're primed now for studios to look at horror scripts and to say, well, look, we made a fuck ton of money with Nosferatu. What else have we got in there? Now, I hope it doesn't do one of the things that got cancelled, which was by, I think it was the Universal Studios, because they have all the IP for the old monsters. They were doing this thing called the Dark Universe, which was going to be a reboot of all of, like, Frankenstein, the Invisible Man. They did The Mummy with Tom Cruise. And it was all going to be...
Oh, they were going to make it like fucking Marvel, where they're all separate films.
They'd already been doing that with the King Kong, Godzilla monster
Yeah,
universe.
they had the Kaiju verse.
Okay.
Yeah,
as well
they were already
That's
doing
not a
that.
terrible idea. That's not terrible.
Which no.
If you have an interesting angle.
Well, we'll see. I mean,
the
Kaiju verse
atrocious.
got really terrible, and there was that what was that, the TV series on Apple with Kurt Russell. It was terrible.
Oh God, yeah. Can't remember what's
it was
now.
Anyway. Don't watch it. It's horrible.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
anyway,
But,
they tried to make
but
prestige TV out of it. It was really bad.
What I would hope now is, instead of trying to do Marvel Joss Whedon style slop with your horror properties, what you should be looking at now is, let's open the books, let's get in some fucking visionary directors, Eggers, and let's actually prime for a reboot. I'd love to see a fucking modern, I mean, it's a classic, and maybe you shouldn't fuck with the classics, but a modern interpretation of James Whale's Bride of Frankenstein, could totally fuck with that. I'd love to see what a really good director could do with that story. You know, The Invisible Man, they brought that back actually and turned that into something pretty good, where it was actually a guy he worked for the military and he created a stealth suit and he just uses it to fucking harass his girlfriend and then he frames her for
Speaking of that,
murder.
can we get the real version of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, not the fucking weird version? The real version would be messed up, man. I would love the real version of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen if they put that on screen.
Yeah, but unfortunately that would have to be done like the Marvel Universe as well. So you'd have a Jekyll and Hyde movie, you'd have an Invisible Man movie, a Alan Quatermain movie, a Captain Nemo movie.
Look, I don't hate that if it's the same tone as the Alan Moore graphic novel. I don't hate it.
Which it will not be.
Oh.
it'll be corporate slop. But anyway, the point being, Nosferatu's made a ton of money, and I definitely think it now sets the stall for let's reboot. Horror reboots can make 3-4 times their budget. Let's go. Let's do some of them.
By the way, sadly, obviously, this film came out last year, so there was no Roger Ebert to review it. But in only very loosely connected information, as I did tell you in our group chat, I did find out the other day, though, and this might be his actual... You know what? We've said and done a lot of fucked up things about Roger Ebert, but you know what? We haven't gone hard enough, and here's why.
Right.
Because this motherfucker gave one of the Matrix sequels 3.5 stars out of 4. The sequels, the Matrix sequels.
Which one?
Like,
That's
the second
important.
one.
Reloaded.
I think it was the second one. I think it was Reloaded.
Okay.
Which, by the way, I was just rewatching recently, and all you need to know is this:
why
they're not good films. Because I found out how much and what strain of weed you need to make them all right films. That's the alchemy I was performing, Malty. I turned that shit
into gold,
into something viewable. But even I, at the end, thought, what did old Ebert think of this? And when I found out 3.5 out of 4, bro, that's basically 9 out of 10. Like, I hate this motherfucker so much. I hate him so much.
So fortunately, why
is the refrain every time I'm glad he's dead?
On RogerEbert.com, I also found that he conveniently for us has lists of his most hated movies and what he calls great movies.
Oh, this guy knew what he was doing. He's got a list of his most hated.
Yep.
He knew what he was doing. This guy, I know.
I can tell you something that Eggers.
Because surely he missed all of Eggers' films, didn't he?
Well,
when did he die? What year did he die?
So let me see.
Maybe he saw The Witch. That might be
because it's always hard. Yeah, I mean he's obviously long dead.
He died in 2013, so he saw none of them.
Oh, he missed them all.
Yeah, he did miss them all. But I want to say, did he ever comment on Robert Eggers' career? Has he ever said anything? Maybe not. Maybe not.
Like, that Eggers guy probably won't do it.
Yeah, he's coming. Yeah, exactly. I'll commit that as my last words. But no, I mean they still review. It's
not like that Christopher McQuarrie, my favorite.
They still review it on their website. The movie reviewers. These were all reviewed by different reviewers, so there's no consistency, obviously. But Robert Eggers' movies have all been reviewed on RogerEbert.com, which is still an active critique website, and they give Nosferatu 4 stars. They give it his best movie. They said The Northman was 3, The Lighthouse was 3. The Witch was 3.5 and Nosferatu was 4. So, look, I mean, in my opinion, they're actually carrying on his foul work.
I will say, when I looked through his most hated movies, I did agree that most of them are very bad.
There's actually a good parallel here, Monty. Like all of his acolytes on his website are probably like there, and there's Ebert floating above them. Like, yeah, I pledge my terrible opinions to you. Eyes rolled up in the head. The Lighthouse, 2 stars. Yes, master.
On a quick glance, though, there were some outliers. So one of the ones that he thought was like among the worst movies ever was Stargate, which I actually have a soft spot for.
No, that's all right, film.
It's like, okay. It's definitely not one of the worst movies ever.
Oh. Also, it was quite interesting, like good graphic visuals and stuff. It's quite a good film.
Also, Constantine is on there, and I don't think Constantine is terrible.
Yeah, it's mid. It's whatever. It's mid.
A terrible adaptation. But listen, I know obviously when we get to episode 100 or whatever, I know what we're going to pull out.
Here's one. The Usual Suspects is listed as one of the worst films ever. That's an outrageous opinion.
How's that even real?
Yeah. That's like just pure mental illness. That is like actually.
So wait a minute. On the one hand, he's really doing the Drake meme of like the usual suspects.
Look at this. He literally has the usual
Reloaded.
suspects.
They're like, the ridiculous like.
There's probably like 30 movies on this list, and The Usual Suspects is one of them. Of his most hated films. That's actually outrageous.
Oh my God, Matrix Reloaded.
I also just don't understand how you could hate Stargate that much. Stargate is just such an inoffensive movie.
It's also outrageous that he hates Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, because that needs, if ever a horror movie needed a critical reappraisal, it would be Halloween 3. But fine, I guess. So look, back to Nosferatu, just to start wrapping it up. I mean, look, for me, like, Eggers hasn't made a bad movie. I do want to make it explicit at the end, because I've no doubt there'll be YouTube comments. Richard's off the reservation on this.
It's all right. He's going to make a Labyrinth sequel, and I don't see how that one could possibly be good. So, Labyrinth is one of the most overrated movies of all time.
I know.
And why would you make a sequel to it like 30 years later? Who knows?
But
40 years later.
He hasn't made a bad movie. In fact, I would, if this was his first movie, I might even be more forgiving in my critique, and probably would have received this movie better if it would come out in 2015 in place of the VVitch. I would have probably appreciated it more. The problem is he started so strong and then continually improved that any even slight regression feels quite drastic, because, as I said, with the Lighthouse and the Northman, he made two absolutely stellar out of these world movies that are beautiful, that are profound, that are powerful, that reward rewatching. And yet for Nosferatu, he made a very passable remake of a classic that has his own visual spin on it, his own take on the mythos that ties it up in a bow, but unfortunately for me just doesn't scale the heights of his previous films, even including The Witch, where you can see how low budget it is. I think The Witch actually has a more interesting story arc, and a less predictable one. Obviously, with a remake, it's very easy to criticize it for being predictable. But that was just the problem for me. Look, I could go 7. I could, but it doesn't. But my heart's not feeling 7. It's like closer to a 6 than a 7 for me. But it's ultimately, that's by Robert Eggers' own scale. Or that's a 6 on the Eggers scale. I want to be very clear about that. It's not a 6 on the movie scale, because, is it better than fucking Ant-Man versus Wasp, Quantumania, or whatever? Like, dude, it's a 20 on that fucking scale. You know what I mean? So, but on the Eggers and other classic movie scale, it's a 6, 6.5. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it. And if you've liked the previous 3, you should totally watch it. And you might have a different opinion. I mean, here we are, 3 people, well-versed in movies, well-versed in Eggers, and yet we all have a different favourite. And our perceptions about which the best one all changed literally during this rewatch, which is the sign of what an amazing filmmaker he is. I don't know if I'll have a critical reappraisal of Nosferatu, but I remember bouncing off the Northman the first time I watched it, as I said in that episode. So maybe this is something I do need to rewatch, and maybe I'll have a renewed appreciation for it in a few years from now. But just overall for me, I couldn't connect with the leads. I wasn't surprised by the story. I thought the makeup, the production value, the cinematography, the sound, all the aesthetic trappings were incredible. 10 out of 10. Absolutely stellar. But it was just like the monster, ultimately soulless beneath the veneer. And that's kind of where I'm at with it, unfortunately for me.
By the way, I also do think, I've said most of what I need to about the film, but what I would just say finally is I actually did find that to probably be the most interesting part of doing this rewatch, is a lot of the films we've done rewatches of before. It's why actually I was so rocked by that whole Batman Returns thing. Most of the time, I actually have a pretty good memory, not only of the film, but sort of how I felt watching the film. I can connect both together. So normally, I'm actually usually pretty on when I remember, if a film was good, if I enjoyed it, if it was I just enjoyed it because, it was you were with friends, or it's actually in itself got its own substance where you could rewatch it. Normally, I'm pretty good at even sort of knowing years later which ones I didn't get at the time because I was young, so I should go rewatch. I was actually genuinely surprised by, like you're saying there, about how different it was when I rewatched these 4 movies, though, because I have seen them all, but I actually did find like it did slightly tweak a little bit my appreciation. Actually, most of them I would say did hold up very well to a rewatch. I actually think the others I was actually almost sort of shocked. I mean, the Northman especially, I think it's actually better on the rewatch. That's why I'm going to put it number 1 on my list now. It's retaken the number 1 spot. So yeah, I like I say, I understand why some people didn't like this film as much. Like I said, like about the first 85% of it, you know exactly where the plot's going, you know exactly what beats are going to come up. I just think he did it really well in a lot of cases, and I could sort of forgive the parts that I didn't give as much of a fuck about, like the central casting. I was just kind of hit and miss on the woman as well. She was good in parts, sometimes not as much, but I do think like for me, everything about the aesthetic just hit so hard. Even the vampire character, the way he spoke, like even the way like I actually did find it simultaneously created in me that sensation of the horror, but then also there was something weirdly compelling about it. Like, but why is this person sort of drawn to this? That part was kind of like fucking with me a bit, so I kind of liked it. Yeah. What do you think, Monty?
I enjoyed it more because, like I said, I didn't have expectations of the plot the second time around, and I do agree that thematically and plot-wise and writing-wise, this is probably the weakest of his movies. It's the least interesting to discuss in terms of what is this of it as a, I would say, art, like literary piece of art, as opposed to an aesthetic piece of art. But it super succeeds at being a great aesthetic piece of art. So the second time around, I just enjoyed it for the visuals and the experience of watching it. And to me, it improved it because, as you guys know, I came in saying that I think Nosferatu was the worst of the Eggers films. And I think I do like it better than The Witch now, even though there is more interesting meat to The Witch. What I'll say about Eggers in general is that I've loved rewatching all of these films, and I will no doubt watch all of these films multiple more times over the course of my life, and I will definitely watch everything Eggers ever makes because he demands that respect and he's super interesting. I don't see a world where I ever am not excited about an Eggers film coming out. Even if he starts making bad movies, I'm still going to come back thinking he's going to make a good movie again, right? So that's where I'm at with him. I think he is uniquely fascinating in terms of his interests and his esoteric drive that causes him to kind of bounce around in all these different time periods. He has said he will never make a movie set in the modern era because it doesn't interest him. And so if we keep seeing these movies where he does the deep research and we're getting a romantic period piece and a 13th century English period piece and a 19th century New England piece and a 17th century New England piece, you know, these are all 8th century, 9th century Viking piece. I mean, these are all super interesting, and there's so many places he can still go with his work. Like, I don't know if he'd do a good job, but what if he did a feudal samurai movie? Might be interesting, right? What if he did a Knights Templar occultist crusade movie? That could be crazy good. So I think there's a lot of stuff he could work with. And so I will continue to watch his work because I think he's one of the best and most interesting and most unique active modern directors. So.
Oh, right, I've got one last thing, which is one thing I did think was interesting that this film made me realize as well, because I've been thinking about this when we were watching the other ones, is one reason I actually do think this guy is destined. I don't know if he'll ever have the commercial success, obviously, but why he could actually be a Christopher Nolan type figure who could, on the one hand, do artistic films, but have a commercial success with them, is actually a bit like Christopher Nolan. He doesn't try and ever make his films like, there's a big secret here, can you figure out what it is? There's never any of that, which, by the way, a lot of people do like from the critical angle, but I'll say that tends to connect very poorly actually with the general audiences. I think one thing about his films is you can just watch them very straight. You don't have to watch it like you don't have to go on some deep Jungian analysis. You don't have to ask like true, if you don't know like classic Dracula films, you're not going to get as much out of like he's literally copying the shots and walking up the stairs and stuff like that. Like there's certain things he's alluding to, but actually in a sense, Richard, I guess essentially what I like is he's actually quite unpretentious. Like he does put substance into his films, but I don't think he does it in a way way where you feel like I do think, like I said on past ones, I think people go the other way. I think people go into a David Lynch movie with a fucking magnifying glass trying to find every possible weird thing they can, which is like sometimes you're not even seeing something that's in there, mate. But I don't find any. I don't even get an ounce of pretension from Eggers' film, but he's still at the same time I find him a very authentic artist.
Yeah, I think that's completely spot on in the read. I think just because you reject modernity, let's say, and you don't want to make movies anchored in the here and now, and you want to have them all be period pieces, I don't think there's anything necessarily
But I think what's cool about him is that he doesn't demand that people do the extra research. In fact, it feels like he wants to have modern audiences be interested in what he's interested in. He's like, isn't this cool? I would like to invite you to be interested in this as well. Like, this is, I'm going to do the research. But look, a Puritan horror movie could have been really boring, especially one using period language. And yet it was immensely popular and everybody was talking about it. And young people were talking about it, which is, we can admit, is weird. It's weird that he was able to do that. But I think that's part of his power and his magnetism, is that he makes the historical periods interesting to people who may not normally be interested.
This is where Hollywood just come in like pieces of shit, like, and now the prequel to The Witch. Who was she? What was she doing that for us? Like,
exactly.
Get me out.
Or the sequel to Labyrinth.
Played by Charlize Theron. But yeah, I hope he spared all of that. But I mean, look, ultimately, out of all of the arcs we've done, definitely one of the more enjoyable ones.
Just all good movies.
Yeah, just all good movies, and movies that I would recommend to everyone. I would even say, like I say, I didn't enjoy Nosferatu. It's not like I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. If you are unburdened, as Kamala Harris might say, if you are unburdened by what has been, and you've not seen a million vampire movies, you probably will enjoy it more than me. And certainly if you've not seen the original Nosferatu, and maybe you could never imagine yourself watching a 1922 silent movie, then fine. This could easily be your definitive version. This could be your definitive vampire movie, right? You know, so I would certainly recommend it to younger audiences and maybe people who don't necessarily engage with horror and they need a kind of excuse in a way to get into a horror movie. There actually are some there's a couple of jump scares in this movie that are well executed. There's definitely some visually horrifying aspects. You've got the corpse sex, you've got plague rats, you've got blood draining, you've got the bites on the chest. The bite wounds are fucking really gross looking. You've got demonic possession.
Just as a little sidebar, I want to shoehorn this fact that I learned in. Apparently, Eggers only wanted blood to be red in this film, so they had to design the entire production around not having any red objects or even objects that appeared red in different colors of light, so that the blood would really pop when you saw it. So they had to like make even browns kind of like different colors because of the lenses I referenced earlier.
That's even one of the iconic lines. That guy, the blood is still alive. Yeah. The blood is still alive. Just screaming that. Yeah.
So there's a fun fact about it. Just the attention to detail is obviously fantastic in any Eggers film.
So, definitely give it a go. I'll recommend any horror movie for anyone because that could become your journey into the greatest and most important movie genre of all time. So,
sadly, Robert isn't here Roger isn't here to give, I don't know, Minecraft 3 out of 4 stars or something. Who knows?
Yeah, that's the real horror. Like, why aren't we reviewing the Minecraft movies or whatnot?
There you go.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, a great arc. Really looking forward to the Gene Hackman arc too. I hope everyone that watches this is as well. So yeah.
Yep. We'll see you next time for The French Connection. See you then.